TI matrix.
In TI matrix, there's basically two different possible visual modes. One, which is arrows. This is a setting inside the indicator where you'll just see these up or down or neutral arrows like this one right here for each of the different cells. And by cells, I'm talking about the little squares, little rectangles inside the matrix. So for here, for example, on this cell, this neutral one right here, that is telling us that there is a neutral sentiment on the 15-minute time frame. So for the row and then the column. Basically, the color of the arrows or the values is going to be dependent, and we're going to get into more detail on this in a further slide, on whether or not the position of current price or current conditions relative to this indication are tending to bias our analysis towards thinking things are bullish or bearish on that time frame and for that technical factor. So arrows is just going to show this simplified view. I personally always use values. Maybe we should change the default to values, but it's a lot simpler look if you're a little bit overwhelmed by all of the values at first, or you're just looking for the score to give you a general reading on whether things from a bird's eye view are bullish or bearish for this selected series of time frames. But when you select values, notice here between these two tables, this is the same table as this one. See, the total score is -35, -35. Same table, but here we're showing arrows and here we're showing values. There's no difference in what the information or the total takeaway is. However, when you show values, you're actually able to see the indicator values that are being used to determine whether things are bullish or bearish for that factor on that time frame. So here, for example, on the resistance row, so these are all the resistances that are being detected by the indicator for the 1 minute, 5 minute, 15, 30, and then the 1 hour chart. With the arrow view, it's just telling us, hey, on the 1 minute, we're bullish relative to resistance, which means we are above resistance. There's no resistance. The resistance on this time frame isn't acting as resistance above us. We're actually already over it, which is a bullish sign. On the 5 minute, the 15 minute, the 30 minute, the 1 hour, we're below resistances. So there's a resistance above us on these time frames. So it's red. It's telling us there's a bearish condition, or there's a bearish factor to the chart here. We have something preventing us from moving up higher. And when you select values, it's the same information, but it's going to tell you exactly what those resistances are, what those supports are, where those trend, and this is actually based on a multi-time frame volume-weighted moving average, the trend. This tells you where that volume-weighted moving average actually is. So here on the 15-minute, we could see 26.1988, and it's red. This is telling us that there's a multi-time frame volume-weighted moving average on the 15-minute chart, and that we are beneath it. That's why it's red. Current price is beneath it. So just by judging these three rectangles right here, these three pieces of data, I can kind of guess that, hey, price is probably somewhere between 26.11 and 26.19 because we're above the trend on the 1 minute and we're beneath the one on the 15-minute. And for the values of sentiment, here you can kind of think of it, it's not an RSI, but you can think of it like an RSI because it's standardized. It's momentum, and it's standardized between 0 and 100. So when you're over 60, it's going to be considered bullish. But between 40 and 60, it's going to be neutral. And beneath 40, it's going to be bearish. So we could see on this instance of TI matrix right here, hey, on the short term and on the 15-minute, let's say, the short to medium term, we're moving up quite strong, especially in the short term. We're starting to reverse bullish on the 15-minute, but on the higher time frames, we are still having downwards momentum. So what does the overall percentage mean? Basically, it's just a summary of all of these biases added up to give you an overall score. It's just a very rough reading, and you can use it as a filter, just a quick thing to gauge. It's just a useful feature. And basically what it is it's all of these values added up. So I'm going to talk about how that's done. So for every time you have the TI matrix open, there's 4 different factors for each time frame that are calculated, right? So for the 1 minute all the way to the 1 hour, it calculates the trend, sentiment, support, and resistance. It then says, okay, are we bullish relative to trend, sentiment, support, or resistance for this time frame? If so, let's give this a positive score of 1. Positive score of 1, 1, 1. So the total score for the 1 minute chart is all bullish. It's +4. Then on this time frame, it's +1, +2, bullish, bullish, bearish, bearish, comes out neutral. gray because they cancel each other out. So we're in the middle. We're middling on the 5 minute. On the 15 minute, we're neutral in the sentiment. We're bearish on everything else. So there's a score of -3. And you can kind of see it's a little hard to make out, but these are little blocks there. You can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4 bearish blocks here on the 30 minute. So basically every time frame gets a score of 4, and then it adds them all up and takes that as a percentage, like a normalized percentage of what the maximum score could possibly be, and says, hey, overall across all these time frames, we are 35% bearish, which just looking here, we can kind of see, okay, that makes sense. So we're -35 relative to where things would be entirely neutral, which would be 0. So the overall score is basically just simple addition of adding up if we're bullish or bearish for all these factors across all these time frames. So what does the percentage mean in relation to the chart? It's basically just what's the alignment or the bias of the chart across these different time frames. It's relative to current price, and it's just a bird's eye view, a general score. So here, this was on M2K yesterday. That's that table we just saw in the previous, the previous chart. This was on the micro Russell. And look, we can see, you'll get used to it, but we can see here that, hey, on the higher time frames, I think this was actually a 5-minute chart I was on. It might be a 15-minute. I think it was a 15-minute chart. But we can see here on this chart that the matrix is pretty much just telling us exactly what we can see with our eyes, which is on the higher time frame, so the chart time frame, the 30, the 1 hour, we're distinctly bearish. We're dropping. But on the shorter time frames, the 1 minute, 5 minute, we're getting bullish, especially on the 1 minute, because look, we've just been directly rising up. And then that score we get is, again, just adding them up. What we suggest, is I suggest changing from arrows to values, because as you're going to see in the next slides, you're able to get a lot more information. And, if you're not comparing with other indicators, or if you're not, let's say, using liquidity IQ or something, you can get a ton of information about support and resistance and where things might reverse, or where there might be a point of contention coming up on the chart, or a pivot. So now we answer those questions. We're going to go into some best practices using TI Matrix. So these are basically just helpful tips. And we released already on TradingView a new version of TI Matrix, which has a lot of different values, exposed, which you can use to create alerts using the scanner version of TI Matrix, and which you can scan for. So one of the practices or things you can do with TI Matrix is just going to be create alerts. So perhaps you want to see once the score switches from bullish to bearish, or past a certain threshold of a bullish score. So for example, you can create an alert that says, hey, alert me on the daily chart of Intel once the score crosses 0 to the downside, which means we've now distinctly started to turn bearish. You can create an alert like that just by clicking create alert on the platform of choice and selecting, hey, excuse me, sorry guys, I'm a little bit sick for coughing. But you can select all these different plots, and you can also compare with the new versions that we're going to be sending out, I think probably this evening, for for NinjaTrader and MotiveWave, which is going to have all these extra plots exposed to make things more versatile. But here's just an example. There's a lot you can play around with, as we're going to see, of an alert I created. So here I have TI Matrix on a chart, and I say, hey, I want to be alerted when the score crosses above just an arbitrary number. I put here 12. So we're starting to get a little bit further into bullish territory, and price is beneath the third higher time frame resistance. So what might this mean? Well, it might mean, hey, we're beneath the midterm resistance, and we're now turning bullish. So what might this mean? Well, it might mean there's still room to the upside to go. There's resistance to be tested above, and we're starting to shift bullish. Maybe I'll call this alert bullish with room to run. So there's a lot of different combinations, as we're going to see. So the next best practice, as we already sort of spoke about, was make use of the values. Click on values, because you can learn a lot about the chart very quickly. And these are the rules for reference that I kind of already spoke about, but these are how they're colored. So for trend, it's going to be colored with that bullish color if price is above the trend line. Excuse me. The volume-weighted moving average, the multi-timeframe one. And if price is below it, it's going to be colored with the bearish color. So on this chart here, we can see that on the 1 minute, we're probably coming down. We're beneath the trend, and we're still holding above these resistances on these higher time frames. Sorry, these volume-weighted moving averages on these higher time frames. So perhaps as we pull down to one of these on the higher time frames, this can be an interesting spot to buy on a pullback, as we'll see. So I can just tell, looking at this matrix, this is why using the values and getting an intuition for them is useful. I can see just looking at this that we're currently experiencing a pullback. We've got some moving averages beneath us on the higher time frames. What else can I see? There's a resistance above price at 26.50, and there are some liquidity levels, resistance, down at 26.35. So maybe I might come up with the idea, hey, we're pulling back. We're overall bullish, right? So we are bullish, but we're pulling back in the short term. There's a resistance, still some upside to be tested. And around 26.35 to 26.40, there are some trend lines, some moving averages, and there's some liquidity levels which might act as support. So hey, maybe if we pull down to 26.35, I can try to buy in here, expecting that we'll move back up. And actually, I took this picture this morning. This is exactly what happened after this. Price on M2K was around these levels. It pulled down, and then it flew up, I think, to like 26.70 or something and bounced off this resistance right here. So the sentiment, bullish, bearish, neutral for those values we already spoke about, 60 plus, 40 minus, or between 40 and 60. And support and resistance, whether it's support or resistance, it's going to have that bullish color if you're above the level, because remember, the way to look at liquidity levels is kind of agnostically. If they're above price, they're resistance. If they're below price, they're support. Best practices again. Okay, so this, I'm going to speed it up a little bit. Change the reference time frame. So just be aware of this feature. By default, it's set to auto. So depending on the chart time frame you're on, it's going to automatically select certain higher time frames. So if you're on, I think, between the 1 minute and the 30 minute, it's going to select these time frames right here by default, the 1, 5, 15, 30, and 1 hour. And if you're on a higher time frame like the 2 hour, it's going to select these more swing trading time frames, but you can also customize them yourself. Another thing you can do is apply multiple instances of the indicator onto the same chart. So here on this chart of M2K, on the 5 minutes or 15 minute, you can see down here, I have applied one instance of TI matrix telling me the intraday stuff, and then I've applied another one so I can keep aware of, well, what are the higher time frame, maybe the swing trading perspective values, so the 4 hour, the 1 day, and we can see, okay, well, look, there's an important trend at 26.50, 26.51 on these higher time frames, and we're not totally bullish as we are on the intraday, but maybe on the intraday we're starting to pull up. We're still kind of bullish on the longer term. Maybe we're going to start to see more of a move upwards. So you can apply multiple instances of the indicator. Now, okay. Spot repeatable setups at a glance. So once you take a look at the matrix and you sort of get used to interpreting these different values relative to current price, you're going to be able to spot some repeatable setups at a glance. So we don't have our predetermined setups, kind of like we do with Liquidity IQ just yet, or named ones, but there's a lot you can do with all the different values we have identified. So some questions you can ask yourself are, where is price in relation to support and resistance levels? I think this is one of the most important ones. Then where are we in relation to current trends? So the volume weighted moving averages. How strong is the sentiment or the momentum? And then how do these conditions differ across time frames? And if you're following along, that's kind of what we were doing here, right? We were able to get a read on a chart without even really needing to know what's happening on the chart itself. And these setups and setup conditions can then be scanned for. So that's the final idea for the indicator. So now I'm going to open up a chart here. Let me move over to Trading View. And can you see my Trading View, Daniel?
Yeah.
Okay. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to open up a random chart. We're just going to show really quickly what this might look like. Let me turn off TI Matrix here, and let's apply it to auto. Okay. And now I'll pick a random stock. Let's say FCX. Well, unfortunately, I already saw what the chart looks like, but here's an example of how we can interpret a chart without even needing to see the price action on the chart. So I hope this is going to explain more how to use the values for your benefit. So let me just make this huge.
That's a good practice, by the way. And if you learn how to read the TI matrix, try to, don't show the price chart at all. Maybe zoom out or just move it to the side, and then just try to interpret of what you can infer just by looking at the values of TI matrix. Very similar to like a pilot who needs to land in like fog or something. He doesn't see anything, yet he can land the airplane based on what the instruments tell him. So kind of a similar analogy. Go ahead, Nicholas.
Perfect. Okay, so what I can see from this time frame is, number one, the first thing we're going to notice is it's all blue, or it's all looking pretty bullish, right? We've got an overall score of 60% bullish. The only things that are pushing against things being entirely bullish are these resistances on these higher time frames. So I'm on the daily chart, and we can see that there's this consistent resistance level, which is basically $70 a share, 69.44. And we can see that it's red, which means this resistance is currently above price. What else can we read? We can see where everything else is bullish. So all of these multi-time frame volume weighted moving averages across all of these time frames are beneath price. They're supporting price. Okay, I can see the sentiment. The shorter term we are, and you can also notice here that on these shorter time frames, the volume weighted moving averages are higher. They're descending, right? So this one's 64.69, 63.58. They're getting smaller, which immediately can tell us that price is pulling away to the upside from these trends, and they're trying to catch up. The sentiment as well is doing the same thing. So the shorter the time frame, this is an extremely high sentiment. This means that in the short term, on the 2-hour chart, we're almost definitely going parabolic, like we're flying upwards. The momentum is extremely high to the upside. On the daily chart, we're also extremely bullish, but it's not that bullish. So what might I infer from that? Well, I might infer that, hey, maybe it's not the best time to chase and buy right now. Maybe I'll want to wait for a pullback. Things are bullish. There's still a resistance above price to break through, which means to me there might be an impending zone break. We might get a nice big bullish blast up to the upside, but right now it might be a little bit overbought. So the next thing we might want to think is, okay, well, what's a level or what's a condition we want to look for to enter in, maybe on a pullback? Well, I can anticipate a pullback pretty easily by looking at these values. So the first thing I'll see is, well, where is the trend lines, the moving averages? Maybe I want to wait for a retracement to a moving average. Well, the nearest one is 64.69. I can then also look at these liquidity levels. There's no support nearby. There's a support at 59. That's quite a ways away. But there's one at 66. So maybe I can expect that if we pull down to 66, this might be, and maybe use my stop loss as, let's say, one of these trend lines right here, the 62.84 line. Maybe we can wait for a pullback to there in expectation that this trend is going to continue. Things are going to remain bullish after things cool off, and we'll get that break through the 69.44 line. Okay, a lot of stuff said. Let's take a look at what the chart actually looks like. So this is basically exactly what we read just from TI Matrix. On the short term, it's ridiculously bullish. It's flying up. It might be too late to get in. Okay, it doesn't really look like that to me, but we might want to wait for a healthy pullback. We also see that there's not really any resistance above us. It's clear skies ahead until we break or test this level, a resistance on the higher time frame. This is the most important line in the sand. So there could be a breakout impending. And we might want to wait for a pullback to get in at a more safe level. Now, this information is also kind of contained within Liquidity IQ, and I'm just going to use them for the visual. Liquidity IQ and something like MA Rush. So MA Rush, oh, well, these are much higher time frames, but we can see here on Liquidity IQ that, hey, there's that resistance that might lead to a zone break if we break through it. And if we hop over to something like the 2-hour chart, and I pop on MA Rush, we can see, hey, we have some moving averages down here. And yes, maybe it would have been wise, or it could be wise, to wait for a pullback down into this general range, where TI Matrix also told us, hey, when we were on the daily chart, actually, I can just come in here. See how the time frames changed when I swapped to a smaller time frame? I can come here and say, hey, I want to see the swing trading. Time frames.
Yeah.
Oh, oops, long term.
I think what I also read in this is that for this particular symbol, I don't want to enter right now. We're right at resistance, as shown at 69.44. I mean, entering right now, a bit too risky, maybe bouncing off. I would either wait, as you said, Niklas, for this resistance to be broken to the upside, then we have really blue skies ahead to the upside, or wait for the pullback, as you mentioned.
Yeah, and the whole, exactly, and like here on the 2-hour, when I apply MA Rush, look where these moving averages are. They're basically in the general range that TI Matrix was also telling us there's important moving averages. We might want to wait for a pullback there. And the whole idea with TI Matrix is there's no visuals on the chart, right? It's not plotting the visuals for you, but it's showing you the underlying values behind, what's unseen there. And you can read a lot from it. So I think I went a little too slow there, Daniel. I'm going to hop
Yeah,
now into.
I think we
Um,
can skip the scanning for the next time, Nicholas. Let's.
oh,
I think
okay.
this was really good for the best practices. We may show you in a future lunch and learn session how we can scan on the different platforms, or maybe in a dedicated boot camp. But I think this explains really nicely of how TI matrix works and what and how you should use it in terms of basically, as I mentioned before, like you're flying an airplane, it's all fog, you can't see anything. TI matrix will still tell you what's going on.